The wind carried the faint scent of pine and something metallic, something that clung to the fences like memory itself. The camp stretched far into the fields of Oklahoma, where endless lines of barbed wire shimmered under the pale sun. Beyond those wires stood rows of low wooden huts painted in dull brown, where the women in gray uniforms moved like shadows of a forgotten war. Anna Schreiber stood by the fence every afternoon, her hands tucked into her sleeves, her breath slow and steady, her eyes fixed on the world beyond. She was 24 and used to silence. Back home in Bremen, she had been a nurse, patching up soldiers whose bodies were beyond saving. Here, she patched up blisters and scraped knuckles, and sometimes, broken pride. The Americans called her Miss Anna, not unkindly, not warmly either, just something in between. She didn't hate them anymore, though she wanted to. Hate took energy, and the war had already taken all of hers. That day, the wind was sharper, and the flag above the camp's gate clapped against the pole. On the other side of the fence, a small white house stood alone, its porch leaning slightly to one side. She often saw a woman there, hanging laundry or feeding chickens, always humming. The woman had hair the color of straw and wore a simple blue dress that fluttered in the wind. Anna had never spoken to her, but sometimes their eyes met, and it felt like looking through a window into a life she had lost. One afternoon, while Anna was sweeping the yard near the infirmary, something fluttered at her feet. A small piece of folded paper caught in the grass. She looked around, then knelt to pick it up. It wasn't from the camp, no number, no official stamp, no sign of the commandant's red pen. Her hands hesitated as she unfolded it. It was a note, written in English. The handwriting was neat, rounded, the kind that came from someone who still believed in manners. Hello. My name is Martha. I live just across the fence. I see you sometimes by the wire. You look lonely. I would be, too. I hope this finds you safely. If it's not against the rules, maybe you can write back. I'll leave a tin by the fence post near the laundry line tomorrow. Anna's heart beat faster. She folded the paper again and looked toward the small white house. The woman was there, hanging a sheet, her head bowed against the sun. Anna slipped the letter into her sleeve and went back to sweeping, pretending nothing had happened. But that night, she couldn't sleep. When the camp lights went out, she sat on her bunk and took out a small scrap of paper she had saved from the infirmary ledger. She dipped her pencil and wrote slowly, carefully, afraid of making a mistake. Dear Martha, thank you for your letter. My name is Anna. You are right, I am lonely. We all are, but I am also afraid. They check our things. If they find this, I may lose my work in the infirmary. But your kindness means something to me. I had forgotten what that felt like. The next morning, she went to hang laundry near the fence. The guards were distracted, smoking near the gate. She bent down to tie her shoe and slipped the folded note into the small tin can wedged between two fence posts. Later that evening, she looked out again. The tin was gone. For days she waited, unsure if she'd been foolish. But then, another note came, slipped through the same way, smelling faintly of lavender soap. Dear Anna, I won't get you in trouble. I promise. I just thought it might be nice to talk. I don't think you are my enemy. The war is over, or nearly over. My husband is gone too. He fought in France. Never came home. I suppose that's why I can't bring myself to hate you either. Anna sat for a long time with that letter in her lap. The handwriting trembled slightly, like it had been written through tears. You don't think I am your enemy, she whispered to herself, but maybe I am mine. The next morning she wrote again. Dear Martha, I am sorry for your husband. I am sorry for all the husbands, all the brothers, all the sons. I used to write letters for dying men. They would dictate their words, and I would hold their hand as they spoke. Sometimes, I would make the words kinder than what they said. Maybe I was trying to save something of them that war couldn't touch. That evening, she placed it in the tin. Martha replied 2 days later. Dear Anna, you must have seen terrible things. I think maybe you carry too much of it still. If I could, I'd invite you to sit on my porch. I'd pour coffee and we could talk about anything except the war. Anna smiled for the first time in weeks. The letter was short, but it felt like sunlight. Over the next weeks, the letters grew longer. They wrote about small things, the sound of the crickets at night, the taste of cornbread, the way the American sky looked so big it could swallow you whole. Anna told Martha about her mother's garden in Bremen, about the roses that grew along the window, about how the air smelled before it rained. Martha told her about her daughter, Elise, who was 7, with freckles and a laugh that could wake the dead. She told her how the child had nightmares, dreaming of planes and sirens, even though she'd never seen war herself. One afternoon, Anna saw the little girl running along the fence with a small yellow ribbon tied in her hair. She waved. The girl waved back before her mother called her inside. That night, Anna wrote, "Your daughter has the kind of smile that makes you believe there's still goodness in the world." The next morning, the tin was gone again, replaced later with a single line written in hurried ink. Maybe that's what the world needs most now, to believe again. As the days passed, something inside Anna began to shift. The bitterness she'd carried since the war began to fade. The guards still looked at her like she was something between a nurse and a prisoner, but she didn't care. She had found something the war couldn't steal, connection. Then one night, the peace cracked. The commandant announced a surprise inspection. Letters were confiscated, beds overturned, trunks opened. Anna's heart pounded as she watched 2 guards pull out her mattress. Beneath it lay the tin, still empty from her last exchange. "What's this?" the guard barked. "An old food tin," she said calmly. He frowned, shook it, and tossed it aside. She kept her face still, her hands steady, though her heart beat like a drum inside her chest. That night, she didn't write. Neither did Martha. Days passed. The silence was heavy. Then, on a rain-soaked morning, Anna found another note in the tin, the paper damp but legible. "Dear Anna, I worried something happened. I saw soldiers near the fence. If this must end, I understand. But I want you to know, you reminded me that not all enemies wear uniforms. Some wear grief, just like me." Anna pressed the paper to her chest and closed her eyes. That afternoon, she wrote back. "Dear Martha, it's not the end. Not yet. I'll keep writing, even if I must hide the words in my shoes. You once said the world needs to believe again. Maybe it can start here, between 2 fences, between 2 women who should have hated each other but didn't." The sun broke through the clouds as she slipped the note into the tin, her hands trembling not with fear but something softer, something close to hope. She looked toward the little white house. Martha was on the porch, her daughter on her lap, the wind tugging gently at their hair. For the first time since the war began, Anna smiled and meant it. And from that moment on, every letter carried something neither of them had dared to write aloud. That somewhere between guilt and grace, humanity still survived. The days after the rain felt different, softer somehow, as if the world had decided to breathe again. The air smelled of wet earth and pine, the sky stretched endlessly over the camp, and for the first time since she had been captured, Anna felt the rhythm of life return to something almost human. Her mornings began with the same dull whistle that called the women to their work details, but she no longer dreaded it. The infirmary smelled faintly of iodine and soap, the small glass bottles lined neatly on the shelf. She liked order. It reminded her that chaos could be controlled, at least in tiny fragments. Martha's letters came every few days, sometimes hidden in the tin, sometimes tucked into a hollow of the fence post. They talked about everything, how the nights grew colder, how the chickens were laying fewer eggs, how Elise was learning to read from an old book of fairy tales. "You'd laugh at her," Martha wrote once, "she refuses to believe any story without a happy ending. I told her the world doesn't always give you one, but she said then we must write our own. Anna read that letter over and over until she could almost hear the child's voice in her mind. But in the camp, whispers began to spread. Someone had been caught trading with locals. A bar of soap here, a loaf of bread there. The commandant was furious, the guards stricter. The women kept their heads down, afraid to draw attention. One afternoon, as Anna approached the fence, she saw a figure standing near the tin. It wasn't Martha. It was a young American soldier, barely older than 19, his uniform too big for his narrow frame. He was turning the tin over in his hands, curiosity written all over his face. Anna froze, her breath caught. He looked up suddenly and their eyes met. For a moment neither moved. Then he lowered the tin and smiled, just faintly. "Ma'am," he said in an awkward accent, "you dropped this?" His tone wasn't harsh, not mocking either, just unsure. "It's old," she said, keeping her voice even. "I use it for bandages." He nodded, studying her. "You're the nurse, right? Anna?" Her name sounded strange coming from him. "Yes," she said slowly. He turned the tin once more, then shrugged and handed it back through the fence. "Guess you might need it more than I do." Their fingers brushed for half a second. Then he walked off toward the guard post. That night Anna didn't write. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the slow breathing of the women around her. The tin now sat hidden beneath a loose board in the infirmary floor, safe but silent. The next morning, Martha's daughter was at the fence, standing on her toes to peek inside the camp. Anna knelt and smiled. "Your mama is well?" she asked softly through the wire. The girl nodded eagerly. "She says hi. She says the corn's growing slow this year." Anna laughed, and the girl's face lit up. She reached through the fence with a small folded paper. "Mama said to give you this." Anna hesitated, then took it quickly, slipping it into her sleeve before anyone saw. That evening, she opened it behind the infirmary, her back against the wall, the sunset painting the sky in fading gold. "Dear Anna, I saw one of the soldiers near the fence. I worried he might have found our tin. I won't write for a while, just in case. But please know, you are in my prayers every night. I think about the day the war ends for good, not just on paper, but in our hearts. Until then, keep safe." Anna folded the paper carefully and pressed it to her lips. She didn't believe in prayers anymore, but for Martha's sake, she wished she did. Weeks passed. The days bled into each other, marked only by the rising and falling of the sun. The guards grew restless, the radio crackled with news of surrender and trials, names spoken with both relief and bitterness. One morning, the young soldier from before came into the infirmary with a sprained wrist. "Car door caught it," he said, sitting awkwardly on the bench. Anna wrapped the bandage carefully, her hands steady though her mind raced. "You didn't report the tin," she said quietly. He looked at her, a slow smile tugging at his lips. "Didn't see a reason to. Ain't a crime to write, is it?" She studied him, trying to read his face. "Depends who you write to," she said. He chuckled softly. "Guess so. But I figure if two people got words to say, maybe they should say them." He left soon after, and Anna felt something shift again, a faint reminder that kindness didn't always wear one color of uniform. The next week, Martha's letters returned. She wrote about Elise losing her first tooth, about how she baked bread and burned it because she got distracted watching the sunset. Anna laughed quietly as she read. She wrote back that night. "Dear Martha, the world still burns things even in peace. Maybe that's how it cleanses itself. But not everything in the camp was quiet. One evening, as Anna was cleaning the infirmary shelves, two guards entered, followed by the commandant himself, a tall man with a face carved from stone. "We've had reports," he said. "Unauthorized contact with civilians. You work near the fence. You've seen anything unusual? Anna's pulse quickened. No, sir. Just the usual, farmers, laundry, birds. He studied her eyes. And the child? She swallowed hard. Sometimes she waves. She's a child, sir. He nodded slowly, then turned toward the door. Be careful where you look, Miss Schreiber. Freedom's a fragile thing here. When he left, her legs trembled so badly she had to sit down. That night, she tore a piece of paper from the back of a medical log and wrote by candlelight. Dear Martha, they are watching more closely now. Please don't send Elise near the fence. If anything happens, promise me you'll stop writing. I would rather lose our words than bring you harm. She hid the note in the tin, praying silently to no one in particular. The next morning, the tin was gone. 3 days passed. Then 5. Then 10. No reply. The silence grew unbearable. She searched the fence line each afternoon, hoping for the faint glint of metal in the sun, but there was nothing. On the 12th day, she saw Martha again, standing far off near her porch, her hands clasped in front of her, eyes fixed on the camp. Their gazes met only for a heartbeat, but it said more than any letter could. Then winter began to creep in, cold and colorless. The wind cut through the fences and made the women huddle close at night. The guards wore thicker coats, their tempers shorter. One morning, Anna was called to the commandant's office. On his desk lay a small tin can. Her heart nearly stopped. This was found near the fence, he said calmly. You know anything about it? She kept her voice steady. It's just an old container, sir. I use them for supplies. He studied her for a long moment. Then he reached inside the tin and pulled out a small folded letter. Her breath caught as she recognized the faint lavender scent. He read aloud, his tone even. Dear Anna, you told me not to write, but I can't help it. The days feel empty without your words. I hope you are safe. Please don't be angry with me. Martha. He set the paper down slowly. I should report this, he said. But the war's over now, more or less. Maybe we can let small things stay small. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes tired. Just make sure it ends here. Understand? She nodded quickly, tears stinging her eyes. When she left the office, she clutched the letter tightly in her hand. Outside, the air was cold and sharp, but she barely felt it. She slipped the paper into her pocket and walked straight to the infirmary. That night, she read the letter again and again until the candle burned low. She thought about Martha's quiet courage, about how 2 women, one German, one American, had built something fragile yet unbreakable in the ruins of hate. She wrote one final time. Dear Martha, the commandant found your letter. He let it pass, but we must stop now. Please don't worry. I'll keep your words with me always. They remind me that the world can heal, even when people cannot. Tell Elise I wish her stories always end happily. The next morning, she placed the letter in the tin one last time, near the post where they had first begun. When she looked up, Martha was there, standing by the fence, her hand resting gently on the wire. No words were spoken. The wind carried everything that needed saying. And when Martha nodded softly and turned back toward her home, Anna felt the weight in her chest lift, not because the story had ended, but because it had been real. For the first time, she understood what Martha meant. Some fences keep people apart, but others hold the letters that make them human. The frost came early that year. By November, the camp's fences glittered in white, the fields silent under sheets of ice. The women huddled near the stoves in their barracks, their laughter reduced to whispers. The war was over, yes, but peace was still learning how to breathe. Rumors spread quietly through the camp that some would soon be sent home. Ships were waiting, papers being signed, names being called out one by one. Anna said nothing. She only waited. She had waited through bombings, through fear, through silence. Waiting had become a kind of life. When her name was finally called, it didn't feel real. The guard reading the list mispronounced it, stumbled over it like a word from another language. Anna Schreiber, he said, transport to New York Harbor. Departure in 3 days. 3 days. After 3 years of captivity, 3 days felt like both a lifetime and a breath. That night, she couldn't sleep. The camp lights flickered, casting long shadows on the wall. The air smelled of cold metal and wood smoke. She thought of Martha, of their last silent meeting by the fence, of the wind carrying the words they couldn't speak. In the morning, she packed her few things, a small comb, a scarf, a notebook she had stolen from the infirmary, and a single folded letter tied with string. She kept that one closest to her heart. The day of departure arrived gray and biting cold. The women lined up near the trucks, their breath rising in clouds. Some cried quietly, others smiled through tears. A few didn't know whether to feel joy or fear. Anna climbed into the truck and turned to look one last time at the fence. The small white house was barely visible through the fog. She couldn't see Martha, but she imagined her standing there, hands clasped, watching the trucks roll away. As the convoy rumbled down the road, Anna whispered into the wind, "Goodbye, my friend." The journey to the port took 2 days. They passed endless stretches of fields, towns with silent main streets, trains that hissed like old ghosts. The world felt wounded, but alive. At the harbor, rows of ships waited, gray against the cold sea. One of the American officers handed Anna her papers. "You'll dock in Bremerhaven," he said. "Germany's rebuilding. You'll find work, maybe even peace." She nodded but didn't answer. Peace was a word that still felt fragile in her mouth. The ship's voyage was long, filled with cold wind and restless nights. The ocean was vast and indifferent. Anna stood on the deck often, staring into the endless water, thinking of the fence, the letters, the sound of Martha's laughter in ink. One evening, a sailor handed her a small envelope. "Mail was sorted late," he said. "Name's yours, I think." She frowned. The paper was worn, the handwriting instantly familiar. "Dear Anna," it began, "they told me your transport leaves soon. I heard it from the postmaster in town. I don't know if this will reach you, but I wanted to try. Elise asked me if she can send you something." She drew a picture, "It's us by the fence, waving. I told her maybe one day we'll send real photographs instead. You once said the world still burns things to cleanse itself. Maybe that's what the war was, though it burned too long, too deep. Still, I believe we'll both plant something new from the ashes. Take care, my friend. You reminded me what kindness feels like again. Love, Martha." Anna read the letter until the ink blurred. The paper trembled in her hands, but not from the wind. She tucked it carefully into her notebook, her heart aching and grateful all at once. When the ship docked in Germany, the air smelled of coal and salt. The port was half ruined, cranes bent, buildings scorched. The people looked like shadows carrying the weight of the past on their backs. Anna walked through the debris, clutching her small bag. She had nowhere to go, no family left, no home that hadn't been touched by war. But she was alive, and that felt like a beginning. She found work at a small hospital in Hamburg, tending to orphans and refugees. The walls were cracked, the supplies scarce, but she worked quietly, steadily, as she always had. Her hands, once instruments of survival, became instruments of rebuilding. At night, she would take out Martha's letters and read them by candlelight. The words felt warm, alive, as if her friend were sitting beside her, sharing stories over coffee and cornbread. Years passed. Germany changed. The fences fell, not with explosions but with time, with forgiveness, with small acts of grace. By 1952, the city had begun to breathe again. The hospital had new paint, the children laughed louder, the markets buzzed with color. One morning, Anna received a parcel from America. It was worn from travel, the paper yellowed, the ink faded. Her hands shook as she read the sender's name. Martha Reynolds, Oklahoma, USA. Inside was a small photograph and a letter. The photo showed a smiling woman standing beside a young girl with bright eyes and the same yellow ribbon from years ago. Behind them, a wooden fence stretched into the horizon, sunlight spilling over it like memory reborn. The letter read simply, "Dear Anna, I don't know if this will find you, but I hope it does. Elise is grown now, and she's learning to be a nurse, like you. She says she wants to help people heal, no matter where they're from. Maybe that's your doing. Maybe that's the echo of what we shared. Sometimes I still look at the fence and think of those letters. I kept every one of yours in a small box under my bed. I told Elise they're proof that kindness can survive anything. If the ocean ever feels smaller, maybe you'll come visit. We'll sit on the porch with coffee and talk about anything but war. With love. Martha." Anna sat at her desk for a long time, her eyes fixed on the photograph. The candlelight trembled softly. Then she opened her notebook, where she had kept all of Martha's letters, tied neatly with twine. She smiled faintly, realizing that their words had outlived every wall built to divide them. She wrote one final letter that night, though she never knew if she would send it. "Dear Martha. The world is quiet now, though I still hear echoes sometimes. I think of you and Elise often, of that little white house and the wind through the fences. You once said we must write our own endings. I think ours has already been written, not with ink, but with forgiveness. I still work at the hospital. The children laugh, and I see pieces of hope in their faces. I keep your letters near my bed. They remind me of who I became because of you. If I ever cross the ocean again, I'll bring no luggage, only your words. Your friend always. Anna." She folded the paper carefully and placed it between the pages of her notebook. Then she closed her eyes and let the quiet settle around her. Outside, snow began to fall over Hamburg, soft and endless, erasing the scars of the city one flake at a time. Years later, when Anna was gone, a young nurse found the notebook among her things. Inside, she discovered the bundle of old letters tied with faded string. She opened the first one and began to read. And for a moment it was as if two voices, one from each side of a fence, spoke again across time, whispering that even in the ruins of the world, kindness had once passed from hand to hand, carried by the wind.